I heard a great quote the other day. Actually, somebody said this. I was at a workshop, and somebody said the way for growth, you could say musical growth or any type of personal growth, is to think differently. Learn how to think differently. We're going to explore that with this tune, Dolores by Wayne Shorter. But meanwhile, I'm Ron Drodos from keyboardimprov.com. Thanks for being here for my and our journey through the real book, number 95. It's Dolores. And why does it invite us to think differently? First of all, because Wayne Shorter thinks differently. I met him and I spent about 10 minutes with just him, sitting right across from him. Just our head, he was like this, and our heads were like a foot apart. We're just talking. I knew someone who went to high school with him, this drummer Bobby Thomas, who had worked with Billy Taylor, my old piano teacher. And he said, hey, go back, talk to Wayne in his dressing room, I said hi, and Wayne invited me to sit down. We just talked for about 10 minutes. This is in the mid-90s, early to mid-90s. And he was wonderful. And he does think a little differently, out of the box in a way that, what does that mean? Maybe we all think differently, and he thinks the usual way, So in any case, that's another way to think about it. So one of the things about Wayne Shorter, if you read interviews with him, he doesn't consider his compositions to be, quote, finished at any given time. That's why you might hear his quartet play stuff that he orbits and other tunes of his that he wrote 20, 30, 40 years ago, and they don't sound anything like it. You might not even hear the melody in a recognizable way, or the chord changes aren't there, and they're sort of quoting the melody. And he considers it like a jumping off point, a launching pad for exploration. He uses that analogy with outer space a lot and cosmic things. And so I think there's a tendency to say, okay, well, he might play it differently every time, but I want to know exactly how it goes, and then play it in that little box, right? That could be fine, because then we feel comfortable, we know we can play it well. And there's only a few recordings of this, really, and there's the Miles Davis quintet version, which we'll talk about in a minute. There's a VSOP quintet, which was like a sort of reunion of the Miles Davis quintet, but with Freddie Hubbard on trumpet instead of Miles. That was in the 70s, led by Herbie Hancock. And then there's a few other versions. And the versions that I heard, at least, they're very good. And they do tend to be sort of like treating this tune like a dolphin dance. Okay, we know what the chords are, we're going to stick to that, we're going to take conventional jazz solos over the changes, and this and that. Nothing wrong with that, okay? And it's wonderful, they're great recordings. It's not what Wayne did with the tune. And it's interesting, check out the version, what is it on? Sorcerer, Nefertiti, I forget what album it's on. Maybe Miles Smiles, I think it's that. Anyway, Dolores, check it out, and then listen to the VSOP version, definitely. So the changes in the real book, for what they are incorrect, and I urge you to get this book called The Studio Recordings of the Miles Davis Quintet, 1965 through 68 by Keith Waters. Keith Waters has done the work that we haven't done. And he has a whole section on Dolores. He's transcribed the bass lines, he's transcribed Miles Davis solo, Wayne Shorter's solo, and he's analyzed it. He's shown a few things. So first of all, he does have what he's pieced together as the chord changes, and they're a little different. You're going to have to look in here for them, and because I want you to get it. That's why I'm not just telling you. But even so, they're inconsistent. They didn't play them in every measure. The bass, might have been an F minor chord, quote unquote, and the bass is playing an E. It was very loose, and that was intentional. A lot of times, Miles, as he shows in this book, wouldn't specify how they're going to solo on a particular tune. So Herbie Hancock's doing what they would call time, no changes. They play in time, but without chord changes, and it's using your ear. And it's just going where the the wind blows, listening to each other, not following a predetermined chord progression. Sometimes one soloist would do that, but then the next one would play the chord changes of the tune, and it's very fluid like that. Herbie Hancock, I think, has said that they used to get lost a lot, and I never believed it, and then you listen to the Plug Nickel recordings or things, they did get lost, and he shows that in this book. Shows it on Dolores, because when he transcribes it, you can see that at some points, Ron Carter on bass is playing 2 measures off from where Wayne Shorter is, and then he'll hit like a D flat chord, like at the end of these sections, and then Wayne, skips his 2 bars and goes to the D flat or something. They did get lost, and they didn't mind that. It was part of the game. It was part of this fresh approach, and maybe it gave them interesting harmonies when somebody's on D flat and someone else is on D minor for 2 beats, and then goes to the D flat. I think it's something that's been lost a lot too, and people are afraid to do that. I remember once I was on a recording session, and the singer, we did all the tunes, I helped produce it, and she said, hey, you know what, we have time for one more, let's do Summertime in the key of A minor or something. And I remember it was a well-known bass player, studio jazz bass player, very well-known, and he said, no, I'm not going to play it without a chord chart, because I don't want someone to listen to this recording and hear me play a wrong note. Fair enough, guy's got a professional career, reputation, but Miles Davis, they didn't worry about that. They played some wrong notes, and they're classics now. People are studying these wrong notes. Get the book, the studio recordings of Miles Davis Quintet by Keith Waters. Incredible book. Okay, so Dolores, I'm going to start by also there's interludes that don't have chords, and he explains. They don't follow these chords necessarily. They're feeling it out. They're saying, what can I do here? What's happening? It's a little vague, or I can try something new. One thing that's obscured this is that there was an interview with another saxophonist, Mel Martin, who interviewed Shorter and asked him about Dolores. And Wayne, this is decades later, said, I think we were doing was like exploring the musical DNA of the tune. Where we take a little, like the cell, and you use that. You find these little, literally like cells, like DNA, and then explore that without necessarily staying to the chord changes. That's been interpreted, that statement, as meaning it was this time, no changes, sort of free form. Mr. Waters says in this book, that's not true. They were playing over chord changes, at least somewhat. But then, within that, exploring the DNA of the tune. So I think maybe Wayne was misinterpreted by a lot of commentators from that interview. The other thing is that on the VSOP recording, he even treats it differently than Miles Davis. So instead of playing these little interludes that don't have any melody, he doesn't do that, even when the trumpet comes in with him on the VSOP. They just go from one to the next statement of these 3 melodic statements. I'm going to start out like Wayne does. I'm just going to play, my right hand, the melody out of tempo, and sort of explore the melody, embellish it, like they did in the early days of jazz too, embellish this melody and see where it takes me. And then bring my left hand in at a certain point, maybe I'll play some of these chord changes, maybe I'll walk a bass line, maybe I'll play some melodies with my left hand or a counterpoint. I don't know. I'm going to challenge myself here and take Wayne's approach to a tune like this. Not necessarily, as I was saying, trying to put it in a little box and say, I know what I'm going to do, and I'm going to play it like Donnelly or something, okay? So I hope that gives you some context. And I've never heard anybody explain it like that. That's why I really try to put together these different sources, these recordings, and what I learned from this book, and help you approach the tune, I think, in a way like the Miles Davis Quintet sort of did. So let's see what happens. I'm just going to start with the melody out of tempo and see what happens. we saw what the possibilities are, and I think I surprised myself a lot of times, especially when my left hand started coming in. You know, what is going to happen? Where's it going to go? And if you can let go of trying to predict that so much, or put pressure on yourself to get to a certain place, like, okay, I'm going to do a burning solo, or whatever it is, it actually opens up a lot more of your creativity and the music sort of coming through you in a different way. You know, trust the listening and following. That's what they did that's what Miles Davis Group did. They trusted that, even if they don't know where each, you know, oh, is the bass player playing a D flat, or is he still on D minor or whatever? But you're listening and trust that. That's I think it was Count Basie who's. Anytime anybody asked him a musical question, he had a one-word answer: listen. It's great advice. So get this book. One way to work on this is to, as you're reading it, you just, every time the author mentions a piece of music, a recording, you listen to that recording. It takes you much longer to get through the book that way, but you'll learn so much more. Good luck with Dolores or any other tunes you're working on. If you're interested in lessons, getting to that next level, check out me at keyboardimprov.com, my website, or if you're interested in Skype lessons, you can send me an email, or however you want to do that. I'd love to help you either if you're at the beginning, get to that point where you're starting to play tunes and it's getting a little easier, you know, what your next step is, that kind of thing, leading you there. Or if you're even at the advanced level, I teach professionals too on how to refine your playing, or certain techniques you're not sure about, block chords, whatever it is. Love to help you with that. Again, thanks for being here, this journey through the real book. Hope it's yours too. And I'll see you next week with Dolphin Dance.